So this patch is airport loops. It was inspired both by a question on our Reddit from a user, SW Gazer, and then doing research to answer that question about Brian Eno's recording techniques for generative music 1, music for airports. And what it is, the basic premise of the patch is that it's for unsynchronized loopers that can be used to create different phased effects and evolving, textures based on the incommensurabilities of their lengths, to use a Eno phrase. I'm a little sick. My voice is not great. I might cough some. I apologize in advance for that. So when you open the patch, it actually begins on this page, and this page is a recording page. And you have a recording button for each of the 4 tracks. You also have a 5th button that will record to all of the tracks at once. And so, you can record A, B, C, or you can record the same input into each one and then change the settings for that loop. That's what I did on what's playing right now. This is all generated from one loop that I did. Playing string harmonics on my bass 6. So you record the loops. One thing to keep in mind is that if you overshoot the buffer of the looper, it can throw off the recording process. So I put in a countdown timer. This is going to erase the fourth loop. And this will count down slowly the 32 seconds of the recording buffer. It won't stop recording when it reaches the end of that, because it was a pretty CPU intensive process to add that feature, but it's a way to keep track of how long your loop is while you're recording it, so that you don't overshoot that buffer. So once you've finished recording, and you can go back to that page obviously and record new things and develop ideas as you go along. You have this page. I'm gonna mute these voices so that we just have one. Be quieter though. So each one of these strips represents one of the voices. There are 4 voices, and I've broken it down into what for me makes sense. Rather than placing all of the controls for each voice next to one another and having to skip over, I clustered the controls for all 4 voices together, so that if you wanted to adjust, for instance, the speed on all of the loops, you could do that by just going across the page. On this side, roughly, I would describe the controls as sort of loop manipulation. So you have the speed. We can change that around. It's tied to pitch. We can reverse or unreverse the track. We can adjust its start position, which I've called trim, or its length, or both. And then I added a feature called tape age, and you can introduce distortion, sort of a flutter, tape flutter distortion into that track with this control. At low levels, it just adds character, I would say. As you push it, it becomes much more apparent. And I gave it a pretty broad range because I like some of these destroyed tape sounds. That's produced by modulating the looper by a random module, which essentially creates a low audio level modulator. So it's kind of an FM is what's happening there. And then on this side we have what I think of as sort of the mixing desk controls. So at the top are these buttons called mute. I wasn't sure whether to call them on or mute or what, but when you press them, you can mute and unmute tracks, and you can determine how quickly those tracks fade in and out using the fade time. The idea was sort of you could set up, you know, different tracks to fade in at different lengths, and rather than having to fiddle too much with the level control, you could automate the process to create different sounds. And if you press the middle stomp switch, what will happen is that the tracks that are muted will fade in, and the ones that are playing will fade out. So you can switch back and forth between a couple of different loops if you want to. I'm going to mute these again. After that, there's a level control. Just an overall volume control for that loop. And then there's a reverb send. Reverb's a reverb light. And the left stomp switch will max out the reverb decay. And then there's also a pan control, so you can move each voice around the stereo field. The loopers themselves are mono, but the output of the patch is stereo. The reverb send is pre-pan because I found that using a stereo reverb didn't really make a lot of difference there, because the reverb would just smear everything out, and so the pan is post reverb send, and the reverb itself is stereo. And if you wanted to adjust the reverb decay, it's on the following page, as well as the control for how quickly the left stomp switch will rise and release the decay time. I've set it pretty long, but you might want something less or more responsive. And these are the inputs and outputs of the patch. It's a pretty simple patch. It was just, for me, it was really about putting all of these things together. So, you know, the idea is that you can get your loops here and just have these controls in one sort of concentrated location. You know, and you can do a lot to affect them, you know, between changing the loop length, adding, you know, sort of a FM distortion vibrato feel to them, sending them into reverb, positioning them around the stereo field. and then, you know, fading them out. And fading them back in. So that's airport loops, which, you know, again, I think is just a fun way to play around with some loops and create different sort of evolving textures and landscapes and that sort of thing. So I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.